What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to be giving you some tips and tricks on how to play as the officer class. Now this will be the third class guide I've uploaded now, so if you haven't seen the other two, there will be a link on screen at the end of the video, so make sure to go and check those ones out as well. Now I have managed to max out my officer class at rank 70, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm a god when it comes to playing this class. It's just the class that best suits my playstyle, as I do love playing the objective. So there will be a few things I might miss or forget to mention, so if that's the case, then make sure to leave a comment down below and let me know of any of your own tips you want to share. In my last guide I got so many helpful comments, which is just going to benefit everyone watching as well, as they can watch the video and then also pick up plenty of tips down in the comments too. So if you do have any tips or even any questions, then don't hesitate to leave a comment down below. So getting stuck straight into it, the officer class starts off with a base HP of 150, which is the exact same as the assault class, and this is pretty much just the mid-tier HP for all of the regular trooper classes. The officer class is meant to be used in a very team-oriented way, and although you can still deal a whole lot of damage yourself, your main objective as an officer should always be to make sure your teammates are being looked after. The officer does have a health buff ability as well, and I'll touch on that properly in just a minute, but this ability just goes hand in hand with looking after your teammates, as I just mentioned. You should always make sure your teammates' health is high, and the more you buff their health, the more chance you have at holding down objectives, which is really the whole point of this class in the first place. Now, just like the rest of the classes in the game, the officer has 4 weapons to choose from, and this is where they can become a little overpowered. They're all pistol style blasters, and each gun's really unique when you compare them to each other, as they all have a specific use for different situations. So the base weapon is probably the worst out of each of these weapons, however it does still handle itself pretty well, so it's by no means a bad weapon at all. It is a single shot blaster, and it has a pretty decent rate of fire along with a medium damage output. There isn't really any reason to pick this weapon over the rest of the blasters, as everything this blaster can do well, the others can definitely do better. But for a base weapon, it's exactly what you would expect, and it can be a very viable option if you're looking for something different to use. The second blaster for the officer class is the S5, and this gun is really well suited to the officer class. I actually find that while it's not the best gun to choose, it does actually force you to play the officer class exactly how it should be played, rather than being able to sprint around and take out enemies like you can with the assault or heavy classes. It has a really slow rate of fire, however the damage is pretty high, especially at mid to close range, so if you can manage to hit your targets, then you're looking at a 2-shot kill for every class other than a heavy. It does suffer a bit at close range though. If you miss your shots, you're pretty much screwed, so just make sure to play a little less aggressively when you're using this blaster. Now moving on to the most overpowered blaster in the game, which is the Blurg, and this is the blaster that gives the officer class a bit of a bad name. It's a 2-round burst weapon, and without any mods the Blurg isn't actually all that great, but once you slap on the improved burst and reduced recoil mods, then it becomes an absolute beast in pretty much any situation. The improved burst mod changes it from a 2-round burst to a 4-round burst, so as you can imagine this absolutely melts anyone so long as you can hit your shots. It is receiving a patch on the 12th of June when Season 2 is released however, so by the time you're watching this it may have already been nerfed a little bit. I'm fairly sure they're only reducing its range though, so it should still be pretty decent at close to mid-range. Now moving on to the last blaster, which is the SE44C, and again this weapon can probably be classed as a little overpowered. It definitely isn't as powerful as the Blurg in terms of range, but it's arguably a better weapon when it comes to close quarters combat. Again, like the Blurg, without mods it's actually nothing crazy, but when you slap on rapid fire then it becomes an absolute beast, and as you can see on screen the rate of fire is absolutely through the roof. If you're like me and enjoy getting up close to the action, then this is probably the best blaster for you, but as I say with every class guide, I definitely recommend going into arcade mode and just playing around with all these blasters to make sure you get the one that suits you the best. With the officer class, it's also definitely important to switch weapons depending on the map or the situation, so make sure you aren't just using one single blaster, as they can all be really effective in their own little ways. So now we're going to move on to the star cards, and rather than going through every single star card, I'm actually just going to list off 3 different combinations that are a good starting point, but just like the weapons, I definitely recommend looking at each and every star card and just figuring out which ones best suit your playstyle. As I mentioned at the start of the video, I am probably going to miss a few decent star cards, as I can be very set in my ways and I usually only change between about 4 or 5 different cards that I like the best. However, every single star card can be so useful for different situations, so if you do have any of your own favourite cards that you think I should have mentioned, then make sure to leave a comment down below and let me know. Now before I do get stuck into the star cards, I'm going to just go over the base abilities for this class first, just for anyone that's a little newer to the game. So the L1 ability is the concussion grenade, and this is just another thing about the officer class that's definitely a little overpowered. This little grenade is going to blind your enemy, slow down their movement speed, cause enough damage to take half their health away, as well as revealing them through walls for a short period of time. I don't think I really need to explain how powerful it is after listing all that off. This would have to be the most overpowered ability in the game by a fairly long margin, and hopefully it can be fixed in an upcoming patch, but for now it's definitely still a beast of an ability. The L1R1 ability is the Battle Command, and this is another awesome ability that really suits the playstyle of the officer class. It's very team oriented, so no matter how useful it is, I don't think it can really be classed as overpowered since it does promote proper team play, and in my opinion that's always a good thing. The Battle Command will just give any teammates in your area a health buff of 100 HP, which is obviously a massive advantage when you're trying to defend or even take an objective. The R1 ability is the Blaster Turret, and again this is another really solid ability for this class. It might not necessarily get you a whole bunch of kills, but it's definitely really handy for locking down hallways or objectives without even having to be close by. The best tactic for this turret is to just set it up overlooking an area you want to protect, and then you can usually head to a different area so that technically you're protecting 2 lanes at once. If you see the turret's taking damage, or if it is doing some damage itself, then that's going to tell you that there are enemies nearby, which obviously gives you a solid heads up that you should head back and take care of the enemies. So now moving on to the star cards, and the first build I'm going to show you guys is going to be more of an objective based build, so this is going to be handy to use if you're really into playing the objective and making sure your team comes home with the win. The first card you're going to want to choose is the Officer's Present star card, and what this will do is reduce the health regen delay for any nearby teammates. With it fully upgraded, this will reduce the delay by 40%, which is super handy when you're in close to an objective surrounded by a bunch of teammates. It pretty much means that everyone's going to get their health back quicker, which is so helpful for obvious reasons. The next card you'll want to pick is the Improved Battle Command card, and this is just going to make it so your Battle Command ability has a shorter recharge time, a bigger effective radius, and not only that, but it buffs your own health too, which is super useful. With this card equipped, you're going to be walking around with a bunch of teammates with 250 to 300 HP, which is an absolute game changer when you're going for the win. Now the last card for this build is a bit of a toss up depending on the situation, so any of these cards are going to be handy to use and they all sort of have their own purpose, so you can chop and change this last card depending on the situation of the game. If you're on offense, then you can't go past the Squad Shield card, which replaces the turret with an energy shield, and this is so underrated when it comes to taking objectives. If you're on defense, then the Improved Blaster Turret is also another good choice. As I mentioned before, just set this up somewhere that you want to defend and this will pretty much do your job for you. So now moving on to the second build, and this is going to be more of an aggressive type of build, so with these cards equipped you're going to be able to go out there and go on some really mean kill streaks. The first card for this build is the Resourceful star card, and this is just going to reduce the recharge time on all your abilities, which obviously allows you to make a lot better use of all your abilities. The next card in this build is going to be the Blast Command card, and this replaces your regular Battle Command ability with the one that gives you unlimited blaster cooling for a short period of time. In simpler terms, this just gives you unlimited ammo for a short amount of time, so this can be super handy to use just before you get into a gunfight with multiple enemies. The last card for this build is the Disruption star card, and this replaces your blaster turret with a device that actually disables the enemy weapons within your area when you use it. So anyone who's in front of you when you use this won't be able to fire their weapon for a short period of time, and obviously this is just so useful for when there are a group of enemies nearby. Just use the Disruptor and usually you can take them all out without much of a fight. Now the third and final build for this class is definitely a little overpowered, and this is just the build I usually use when the team needs someone to step up and take a bit of control. This is going to maximise your battle point income, which is going to help you unlock a hero faster than anyone else in the game by a fairly long way. The first card you'll need is the Officer's Present star card that I mentioned before, which reduces the regen delay of your teammates. Not only will this help the teammates around you, but it's going to rake in plenty of battle points for you as well. The next card is the Bounty Hunter star card that I've mentioned in both my other class guides as well, and this card literally just increases the rate at which you earn battle points, which is exactly what we're trying to do with this build. The last card to choose is the Improved Battle Command card like I mentioned earlier, and this is just helpful for gaining battle points since every teammate you buff rewards you with 30 battle points. At the start of the game, the best way to get a head start is to buff everyone straight off the bat. Even though it doesn't necessarily help them out in terms of the game, it's going to give you roughly 500 battle points head start, and by the time you've gotten to the battle, it's going to be recharged and ready to go. Now, it is a good idea to try some of these star card combinations, however I do also recommend just playing around with every single star card and figuring out which ones best suit you. It all comes down to your playstyle, so even though these builds are very handy to use, they might not suit you as much as they suit the others. So that's going to be it for today's class guide, guys. Hopefully some of these tips can help you out, because the officer class is definitely the best class in the game, and it's always good to fall back on when your team isn't doing very well. As I mentioned before, if you have any of your own tips, then make sure to leave them down in the comments. I definitely would have missed some handy cards in this guide, as I can't go over everything in such a short video, so make sure to give us your own tips as well. If you're new to the channel, then feel free to subscribe to see the rest of my guide videos, and make sure to turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on anything new. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.